Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Artful Loving. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about moving beyond codependence in intimate relationships. So stick around. Hi, I'm Nick Tovey, relationships and intimacy counselor, coach, educator, and author of the book, The Revolutionary Man. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead, click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified when new videos come your way. If you're new to me and want to learn a little bit more about myself, my work, and how you can possibly work with me, head to my website, nicktovey.com. And if you've got any questions, anything at all, please get in touch. If you like this video, click the like button, share it with your friends, give me some comments, questions, feedback, anything, any level of interaction that you can give is going to give me the feeling that I'm not talking to myself, and do all of the things that YouTube really needs for this content, this information to get out to as many people as possible. So please interact with me. Love to hear from you. So codependence in relationship. We've all heard that codependence is this problematic situation that we can all experience in relationship, and it's often given a very bad rap, and we're taught that it's a problem, it's a bad thing, it's something wrong in relationship, and to some degree it can be problematic, and also I don't believe that seeing it as a problem is necessarily a good way to look at it. I'm going to look at it a little differently than that. What I like, the way I like to look at relationships in general, as I'd like to look at life, is on through an evolutionary lens. Yeah, so I recognize that we're always constantly evolving. If you imagine, we're always evolving on this upwards trajectory as we grow and develop and learn more. When you look at humanity over thousands of years, then you can see the evolution of humanity, of how our intelligence, how our consciousness, how our body, our biology, and our psychology has changed over a period of time. And so, you know, on time versus evolution, there's always this upward trajectory. So of course the same goes for us as individuals. We're always evolving, and there's many different evolutionary developmental models that we can look at. When you look at Piaget's model, you can look at Erickson's model, you can look at spiral dynamics or integral models, and they're all very useful in their own ways, and so these are models that I've looked at along the years, along my own process and my own education, and given me an understanding that we are evolutionary beings. And so therefore relationships are also evolutionary, because we are two individuals who are on our evolutionary journey in a relationship together. So therefore it stands to reason that the relationship itself is going to be evolving. And of course, as we evolve, the types and ways in which we relate to people also change and evolve and develop. And so codependency is one particular phase on that journey of evolution. So it's not wrong, it's not bad, it's not something we need to avoid or get rid of, it's just a necessary part on the path. So let's look a little bit more about my evolutionary model of relationships. So I like to think of relationships progressing through three different phases of relationships, yeah? And when I'm talking about the three phases of relationship, it might not necessarily be one particular relationship we're talking about, but what we're talking about is how we as a human individual tend to engage in relationships. So of course a relationship is going to go through its own evolutionary path and can very well go through these different phases of evolution, as I'm going to describe in a minute. But often what happens is we, as an individual, will evolve, sometimes at a different speed, if you like, a different our evolution will take a different trajectory than the partner that we may be in. And so therefore sometimes what happens is, let's say we evolve along this line, they evolve along that line, and therefore we're not meeting anymore, and so the relationship isn't serving our needs anymore, and so it tends to end. And so we go on to the next relationship, and we'll probably do things differently than we did in the past relationships, because we've learned some things, we've evolved, we've developed, we are now operating at a different level of relational intelligence and relational consciousness. And so the last relationship, hopefully, if we are changing and evolving and developing, sometimes people do that at different speeds than others. But I think we're all on that same trajectory. And yes, like I said, some people do it quicker than others. And it takes, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, but it takes us to be conscious participants in our own evolution in order to speed up that process. Yeah. So in this context, when we're talking about relational evolution, we want to be looking at what's in the way of me relating in a way that feels better for me. What are the problematic areas that have come up for me in relationships? How am I playing out the same sorts of patterns from relationship to relationship? And if I want to make changes, maybe I need to recognize that I'm the common denominator in all of those relational challenges that I've had, and so therefore maybe it's me who needs to have a good look at myself and do some work in order to move beyond those previously held patterns. Yeah. So the 3 phases of relationship. Phase 1 is what we call codependence. So what does codependence mean? Very simply, codependence means we depend on each other. Yeah, there's a dependence that we've created as an unspoken mutual agreement where I get my needs met by you and you get my needs met by me. And therefore, there's this entanglement that occurs in a codependent relationship, which sometimes isn't a very healthy experience. Because, and this is where codependence really becomes problematic, is often what is making up a codependent relational dynamic are unconscious patterns. Yeah, there are patterns that we're playing out in relationship that are coming from unmet needs that we haven't addressed, that we haven't brought into our conscious mind. So we're not aware of why we're doing such patterns and playing out such dynamics. And so it's just operating unconsciously. So when you think of often relational dynamics that are codependent, stem back to childhood wounds that we may have received in our early childhood, in our early experiences of life. You can go back and look at some of my trauma episodes, which I'll link to here. Have a look at that and then get a little bit more insight into what I'm talking about when I'm talking about early childhood trauma. But essentially, in our early childhood experiences, this is when we're establishing our understanding of what love is, of who we are, of how the world is, and how we relate to the world. And so if our attachment needs and our needs for love and affection aren't necessarily met as children, then we start to adapt and we start to create maladaptive behaviors and coping mechanisms in order to get our needs met. Sometimes later on in life, those maladaptive coping mechanisms play out in unhealthy relationship dynamics, in intimate relationship dynamics. So we end up putting pressure on our partner in order to meet a childhood need that we never got met by our parents of origin, or our family of origin. Yeah. So when I'm projecting this need, this childhood need onto a intimate partner, of course they're never going to be able to fulfill that need because they're not my parent. It's not their role. It's not their responsibility. But this is often what happens in a codependent relationship dynamic. Is we have two people that are playing a part in this unwritten, established agreement of supporting each other's childhood wounds, and so we end up with this dance that occurs between these two partners, which is full of drama, full of abandonment and neglect and unmet expectations. Yeah, and of course, the fears of those abandonments, the fears of those neglects, yeah, and so we there's a lot of neediness, there's a lot of push and pull that can happen in relationship, and one of the primary experiences of that codependent relationship is that we are in it from this place of need. It's like, I need you, you need me. There's a sense of need, and sometimes opposing that sense of need, there can also be a sense of aloofness, yeah, hands-offness, and often relational dynamics where one partner's the needy one, the graspy one, the clingy one, and another partner's the aloof one, the detached one, the avoidant one, and so they are perfect dynamics that make up codependent relationships. Yeah, so that's codependency. Codependency, another word I like to use for codependency, is a wound mate relationship. Yeah, so what we're talking about is two partners that are intertwined, enmeshed in each other to get their wounds and their then unmet needs from those childhood wounds met. And of course, it never works. They never get fully met. They never get fulfilled. And so that's when it becomes a problematic, drama-filled relationship. The second phase of relationship happens when we've learned a little bit. We may have done a little bit of therapy, or we've read a few books and started to examine these wounds that we've somehow become aware of. Yeah, and that may have been because we've had relationship breakdown after relationship breakdown, and we've started to realize maybe I'm part of the reason for those breakdowns. Yeah, and so we might go on a bit of a journey of self-discovery, and yet there's still this need to be with someone, yeah, because we haven't quite healed that wound. And of course, it's a very natural human need and desire to be in relationship. Yeah, so we end up moving from the codependency relationship where we're enmeshed, tightly interwoven with each other from this place of wound need, to the point where it's like, actually no, I'm just going to be an independent human being, and I'm going to look after number one, and I've heard about boundaries and good communication and all of these things, and I'm recognizing that I need to look after myself. I need to put my own oxygen mask on before anybody else's. Yeah, and so I start to create an idea of self in relationship, and this is where we start to become what we call independent. The next phase of relationship, phase 2, is the independent relationship. So where we end up with two partners, rather than being enmeshed like the codependence partner, we are two partners, two islands floating around, bobbing around in the ocean next to each other, but not really fully connecting. And so we've got two individuals that are both looking after themselves. They're both functional in their relationship. It can be a great partnership in a lot of regards. Yeah, so there's a lot of functionality. There's a lot of agreements and boundaries that are starting to be made, but it's coming from this place of, I don't need you, but you can hang around. You can be around, and sometimes we can come together, we can interact, and we can hang out together. But the way I like to describe the independent version of relationships is where we move from wound mates into roommates. So we're existing together, we're functioning together, we probably really enjoy each other's company, but there's not a lot of passion. Yeah, all of the drama, the passion that was created by the drama of the woundmate relationship has gone, because we're starting to establish sovereignty. We're starting to come into alignment with our own individuation and create a sense of self, yeah, which doesn't need another person. I don't need another person to fill me, to complete me. Yeah, it's a very necessary part of the process. Yeah, necessary part of the evolutionary journey, as is codependency. Yeah, like I said, it's a very necessary part of the journey. It's part of the evolutionary journey, and so isn't anything wrong about it. May not work so well sometimes, and this is where the independent relationship can become a little boring. Yeah, because we've lost a lot of that passion. We're in a sense of sovereignty, so there's not a lot of room for deep, intimate connection, because I'm just solid in myself and I don't need someone, so I don't let them in. Sometimes I start to create a boundary around self, and in the process of individuation and creating a sense of self, a sense of individuality, I create a boundary, and through that boundary it can be hard to penetrate, and so I don't let anybody in that moment. And so there's a sense of functionality in relationships, but not a lot of intimacy, not a lot of vulnerability. And so that's the second stage of relationship. Again, like I said, very necessary on the path, on the journey of our evolutionary relational trajectory. So then we move to the third phase of relationship, and this is what I call interdependent. Yeah, so this is where we take a bit from column A, a bit from column B, and start to understand how we can bring all of that together. Yeah, so like I said, we've gone through codependency. We've recognized there's some wounding, some unmet needs that never got established and never got met in my early childhood. So I'm recognizing that I don't want to get those met by another partner, because that doesn't work so well. History has told me that it doesn't work. So I've come to I've looked inwards. I've started to do the inner work and started to establish my own individuation. I'm kicking goals in my career, in my personal development, and all of those things. And I'm in this very nice, comfortable, functional relationship that lacks passion, lacks dynamism, lacks polarity, and isn't very sexy. Yeah, and so I recognize that maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe there's another phase, and this is the next phase, phase 3, the interdependent relationship. So the interdependent relationship is about recognizing that yes, I don't want to be dependent on somebody else from this place of need, but I've also got these wounds that aren't going to go away. But what I can do is start to understand how they play out and recognize where they're coming from, how they show themselves in my emotions and my behaviors, and how they come up from time to time when I'm feeling a little insecure. I know my triggers. I recognize when they come up. If you behave this way in relationship, it triggers me in this way, and then I start to behave like this. So I've brought awareness and consciousness to my unmet needs and my unconscious behaviors that then start to play a role in our relationship. That doesn't mean I just let them go willy-nilly, but what it does mean is that now I've got awareness. I can see and understand why I do what I do and how that presents itself in relationship. Not only that, I can see yours. I recognize your wounds and how your wounds lead you to behave. And so I'm not going to put you down for that, because I wouldn't want you to do that to me. But what I do is I understand. I understand why you do what you do and when you do what you do when you do what you do. And so I can maybe take care of you in some ways by trying not to behave in a way that triggers your abandonment wound, or just have some compassion and understanding and when those wounds do get triggered. So it's about recognizing that these wounds are there. They're not going to go away. Yes, they may have a little less power over us because they're now in the forefront of our mind. We have awareness, and so with awareness we also have choice. We can't change what we can't see. Yeah. So once we've brought an unconscious pattern into our conscious realm, we can see it, and then I have no excuses. Yeah. So I can't just justify bad behavior because I'm aware of my patterns. Yeah, I'm aware of my behaviors when I'm in a triggered emotional state. So I've got choice now. What else we do in the interdependent relationship is recognize that, this relationship, as I've said 100 million times before, this relationship that we're in is a verb. It's something we do. It's not something we have. Yeah. And so in the doing of this relationship, I recognize that if I've got a relationship with somebody who I can trust, who has my best interests at heart, as I do theirs, then they can hold me to account and keep me with compassion, with understanding, but also without just pandering to my bullshit. They can hold me to account so I can be the best person I can be, and I can start to address some of these unconscious patterns and change behavior, and then of course change the nature of a relationship for me. So in the interdependent relationship, we're making very conscious agreements around how we're gonna do this relationship, what are the problems that can happen, how can we deal with those problems when they come up, and making those conscious agreements. We're entering into this relationship with intention, and knowing that shit's gonna come up, because it does, because we're flawed, wounded human beings, and we've got our insecurities, we've got our problematic behaviors. So they're not. Let's not deny the fact that they're there and pretend they don't exist. Yes, let's bring it into the forefront, into awareness, into consciousness, and do the work to work through them. Yeah. What else I think is really important in the interdependent relationship is that I recognize that yes, I can do life on my own. I've got my shit together enough to recognize that I can walk my path, I can do my practice, I can kick my goals that I need to, I can fulfill a good, healthy, solid life. And I want companionship. I want to do this life with somebody else, with someone who I can meet at a really beautiful level, on an emotional level, a psychological level, a heart level, all of the different ways in which we relate, and we can journey together and be each other's partners and companions and lovers, to the point where I know by being in relationship with you, I'm going to be a better human being, because being two, the benefits of being two are exponential. Yeah. So there's gifts that we get from being in relationship, And so we recognize that, not from a place of need, not from the codependency neediness, but from a full conscious, yes, I want this, and I know that I'm going to do better by doing this, and you're the person for me to do this with. And recognizing that maybe there's going to be a point where we out-evolve each other. Our needs just don't meet each other, and we may need to part ways. Yeah, that's a very possible part of any relationship, and we need to bring that into consciousness, not hiding behind any denial and fairy tale ideas around what this relationship is meant to be. So something that's really important when we're looking at relationships through this evolutionary lens, and we can recognize the stages of development that we go through, is that this isn't a hierarchy. Yeah. Yes, as we evolve, I like to see it as a concentric circle rather than this hierarchy. Yeah. So as we evolve beyond the previous phase of relationship, we take the knowledge, the wisdom, the goal, the gifts that previous version of relationship gave us. So we take it with us as we evolve onto the next phase of relationship and the next phase of our own personal, individual evolutionary journey. And so that's what helps us evolve, is that we take with us the learnings from the previous stage. Yeah. So it's a transcend and include. So as we transcend to the next phase of relationship, we include everything from the previous phase of relationship. And it's also not linear. Yeah. It doesn't mean that because we've done codependency once, we're never going to do it again because we've moved through independence and we're now doing interdependence. We're going to travel backwards and forwards throughout our experience of relationship. And this is a really important part of the interdependent relationship, is that we recognize that. We recognize that we're going to devolve. We're going to regress back to our childlike self that just wants what they want, and we're going to have tantrums, and we're going to feel triggered in our emotions, and our childhood wounds are going to get activated. And that's just life. That's part of being a human being. So rather than deny it, rather than suppress it and pretend that doesn't exist, we welcome it. Yeah, we welcome it, we recognize it, and we work with it. Yeah, we understand it, we work with it, we look at it, we face it head on. It's not for the faint of heart, the interdependent relationship, because it does require a lot of humility, a lot of honesty, a lot of real good use of the skills and the tools of relationship, like good communication, boundaries, consent, creating intimacy. All of those things, they're very, very important for making a good, healthy, functional relationship. But it can be done. Yeah, it can be done. So I like to think of the interdependent version of relationship not as a phase that we get to, and then we get a badge of honor and we're like, yes, I'm an evolved relational human. But it's this place where we want to aspire to. It's this state of being, this state of relationship that we constantly want to aspire to, and that we want to make a like a guiding light to lead us along this path of relationship, knowing full well we're gonna fuck it up, we're gonna devolve, we're gonna turn into kids at some point. It's a beautiful thing to do, but we have compassion for ourselves and each other when we do that. Yeah. So if you want to do a little bit of work in order to get towards this interdependent relational style model, if you recognize some of these codependent models and patterns that are in your relationship, or possibly even you're at the independent phase of relationship and finding things just a little boring, maybe it's time for you, either as an individual or as a couple, to come and do some work about it. Yeah. So get in contact. Email me, check out the website, get in touch, let's have a chat, and let's see if we can work together in order to help you move through these different phases of relationship. if you feel that that's a good fit for you. No pressure at all. Anyway, hopefully this is useful, this is valuable. So if it is, please go ahead, click the like, share it with your friends and loved ones who you think you might find it useful. And of course, please subscribe. Okay, much love until next time. Take care.